Hey YouTube, Snowflocky's Emos here today with another episode of You've Just Activated My Trap Card, the series in which I talk about trap cards that I quite enjoy playing or just have an interest in, and then discussing maybe their uses and places in today's game, where you can use them, things like that. And today I am activating my copy of Summon Limit, a pretty strong but easy to throw in floodgate that provides you that floodgate opportunity for lots of decks that maybe can't run the other floodgates. Let's get into it. So, Summon Limit is a continuous trap card that says neither player can summon more than 2 times per turn. Now, this is an old copy. Modern copies with problem-solving card text will say that negated summons count towards the count, but negated card effects that would special summon do not count. So that means, like, if you mechanically make an extra deck monster and negate that summon, it counts towards the summon limit. But if I say negate monster reborn, then of course it does not count towards the summon limit. They can summon another monster because that would be special summoning via a card effect, not a game mechanic itself. So summon limit is, pretty powerful in the fact that a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh is based around combo decks. I mean, decks where you're going to play a monster that searches you another monster that special summons it for free, that dumps another monster in the grave that you're going to special summon, make an extra deck monster, build a big board of, 3 monsters that are going to have Omni negate effects. That's fine. Except Summon Limit really makes it so that decks that do that can't do that without outing this card. Because limiting yourself to 2 summons changes the game quite a bit. A lot of people need 2 combo pieces to make their first extra deck monster, and if you just deny them their extra deck, well, they're going to have a tough time. So, when do we play Summon Limit? Well, first off, Summon Limit is a floodgate card, which is a continuous spell or trap card. It can also exist on monsters that basically restricts a mechanic of the game from happening. Summon Limit in case this putting a set number of how many times you can actually special summon. Now, many of you may know floodgates because there are some really powerful ones in the game. Skill Drain, one that, of course, negates all face-up monster effects on the field. Teekboo, there can be only one, which makes them only each player only able to control 1 monster of each type. Rivalry, which is a card that says players can only control 1 type of monster, and Goes and Match, cards that can make each player only control 1 attribute. Just as a few examples, these are some of the most common, powerful examples of trap card floodgates. But Summon Limit, while not as, Summon Limit is a bit easier to play around. But the thing about Summon Limit is it's pretty easy to slot Summon Limit into a deck where, like, maybe you need your monster effects, so you can't play Skill Drain. Maybe you're playing a bunch of monsters of the same type, so you can't play There Can Only Be One. Maybe your monsters are all different attributes, and you can't throw Goes and Match, or Goes and Match just isn't good right now because all the best decks are playing the, same attribute. Well, Summon Limit is pretty universal because most things are summoning multiple times, and a lot of things want to summon more than twice. So if you're playing a slow deck, takes a little while for you to get going, or maybe just is not an extra deck combo deck, Summon Limit is a great tool, especially if you want to play ones that still have effects. I'll go into some examples for a bit in a bit here. But yeah, so Summon Limit is pretty good, and there's a lot of things that once you've restricted your opponent to 2 summons, there's a lot of ways you can combo with this card with other cards that you may be playing that can leave your opponent in an open board state. Talking a little more about some great cards that work with Summon Limit, I'm talking about Torrential Tribute. Or, of course, I also have a copy of Blind Obliteration, but let's mostly just talk about Torrential Tribute. Torrential Tribute is a trap card that says when a monster is summoned, destroy all monsters on the field. Now, this works pretty well because it acts in response to a successful summon, and Summon Limit is a card that makes it so each player can only summon twice. So, say your opponent's playing, they play a monster. Cool. Their monster special summons another monster from their deck. There's the second monster. When the second monster is summoned, it's time to flip Torrential Tribute. I'm going to destroy all monsters they've controlled. 2 monsters that they have summoned. Now, chaining to Torrential Tribute, I can chain Summon Limit so that I'm going to wipe their board, and then Summon Limit also makes it so that neither player can summon more than twice. Well, they've already summoned 2 monsters. And that means if their monsters have floating effects that are going to special summon, that's not going to activate, and they can't follow up with any more summons. So this just wiped their board, stopped their combo, and leaves them on an open board. Now, it's going to be hard to OTK if summon limit is still up on your turn, because you can only summon 2 monsters. It's got to be 2 good monsters. But can definitely put you in an advantage to set up, especially in a slower deck where you're probably playing more trap cards anyway. This combo has done so much for me. I love it. I love playing Torrential Tribute and then flipping Summon Limit in response. Next, let's talk about Solemn Strike and Solemn Judgment. Now, as I said, negated card effects that would summon do not count. So if I Solemn Strike an effect of a monster that's going to special summon a monster from the deck, that does not count. However, if my opponent takes 2 monsters and special summons an extra deck monster, and I flip Solemn Strike to negate the special summon of that extra deck monster through the mechanic, then on the follow-up, then on another chain afterwards, because I can't chain this to Solemn Strike because it's a counter trap, but then afterward on a new chain, I can flip Summon Limit. And now they might also be in the position where they can't do it. Solemn Judgment doing the same thing. If you negate the mechanical summon of an extra deck monster or something like that, then on another chain, you can play Summon Limit. Well, boom, now their board is open again. Especially if you can get them to bait out a spell or trap card that maybe is going to special summon, but you've, then you can change Summon Limit to that and put them in a tough spot. Next up, we also got Ghost Ogre, which is a pretty cool hand trap. Not one that pops up every once in a while. Not one of the most popular. But what Ghost Ogre does is when a monster activates its effect, or a spell or trap, of course. But you can, send this card to the graveyard and destroy that card. So the effect is still going off, but you can let a monster summon, destroy that monster, and then flip Summon Limit, especially if they've already used up the second summon. Or maybe you only give them one more summon. Maybe they normal, you flip Summon Limit. Usually with Summon Limit, you want to wait till after they've summoned twice to hit them with the Summon Limit. If you play it early, it gives them more chance to play around it. But something to keep in mind, something you can do. Additionally, if you're someone who likes to play battle traps, Summon Limit makes battle traps a bit more effective, because if you flip Summon Limit after your opponent summons 2 monsters, well, they can't go into Nightmare Phoenix to pop your back row. They have 2 monsters, maybe none of them have back row removal, usually they don't at this point. So, they'll just be like, okay, fine, well, they're going to attack. Well, boom, you could play Mirror Force. I have Blazing Mirror Force, of course, because I really like this card. It can destroy those monsters, open their board, and of course, if they've already summoned twice, then they're not going to get any floating effects either. So it just wipes their board, and, they don't get to replace it. And that's pretty cool. So Summon Limit works in a great area where you can basically wait out your opponent to summon 2 cards at least. Keep their board open, then hit them with Summon Limit, so they have to pass on an open board. They have to basically end their turn. So that's it for a couple of card synergies that were on my mind. Now I'm going to talk about decks where I'm playing Summon Limit. So, talking about where I've been playing Summon Limit, first off, this card comes real in handy in my Prediction Princess deck. So what's pretty cool about Summon Limit in this deck is it synergizes well with Pot of the Forbidden, because Pot of the Forbidden has a flip effect that lets me destroy all monsters my opponent controls, and with Terra Tray, I can activate that on my opponent's turn. So if I got this setup with Summon Limit face down, my opponent summons their 2 monsters, I flip summon my Pot of the Forbidden. Pot of the Forbidden can activate its effect, of course, to destroy all monsters my opponent controls. Then I can flip Summon Limit, so now their board is wiped and they can't summon any more cards. I already have 2 big monsters on the field, and while Prediction Princess can summon more than 2 times, a lot of times I don't need to summon more than 2, especially once Terra Tray's on the field, because I'm mostly just going to be using maybe a normal summoner set to get another monster on the field, or a Link summon to get rid of my Pot of the Forbidden and get it in the graveyard, and then use Terra Tray's effect to summon at the end phase, usually another Pot of the Forbidden, so I would be able to follow up with the same play on my next turn. So it doesn't hinder us too much, and is very powerful combo that can be sort of a win con with Prediction Princess, so I very much like Summon Limit in that deck. Next, another deck that I quite enjoy playing that Summon Limit comes in use for is Starry Nights. So Starry Nights are kind of a very slow trap card control deck. that revolves around, uh, dropping Starry Night Dragon, putting it back in your hand, and then using its effect to pop a monster. So what's pretty cool about this is, I want to use these effects, so I can't really play Skill Drain. And, while this is a dragon and this is a fairy, I usually want to have multiple fairy types on the field, so I can't really play Teekboo. But Summon Limit fits in quite nicely here. Um, my opponent plays a monster. They summon a second monster. I can use my Holy Night trap card to drop Starry Night, Starry Dragon from my hand. Pop one of their monsters, of course. That leaves them with only one monster on the field, and of course they've already used up their second summon. This summon takes place during my opponent's turn, which is fine, because when this card bounces back to the hand, I can summon Orbital 2 from my grave, which is neat. And that can be done on my opponent's turn in a way that that is fine as a way to use my two summons. And of course, on my own turn, I'm probably only going to be either summoning an Orbital or a Rael, and of course, then trying to summon a Starry Night from my hand, each of which is just two summons. So, pretty good trap card. Doesn't slow me down too much. There's not much I can do more than summon two monsters most time anyway, and makes my effects a lot more powerful on my opponent by destroying their monsters, disrupting them, and specifically is more powerful because Summon Limit is stopping them from doing more follow-up summoning. Additionally, when I play a deck like Blue Eyes, which is a deck that can summon a lot, but also is fine with summoning a little, because when Summon Limit's on board, it's hard for your opponent to make bigger monsters unless they main deck them, and Blue Eyes is reliably a big monster that I can even special summon another one on my opponent's turn, and things like that, so it just becomes a lot harder for opponents to deal with when they can't summon multiple monsters to get rid of Blue Eyes. So there's a little synergy there, of course, and of course, this allows me to play cards like Torrential Tribute. In this deck too, I can wipe my own board and not care, because True Light can just bring me back another Blue Eyes White Dragon, and, perfectly fine. Another deck where I find this card quite applicable is in my Worm deck, which you may have seen. Worms are pretty cool because Worm Yagan here has this great effect where when it's flip face up, I can return a monster to the hand, and I can easily trigger that with the trap card W Nebula Meteorite, which will flip Worm Yagan. I can send a monster back to their hand. Maybe they just summon their second monster. I can send that one back to the hand, chain summon limit. Now they can't summon any more monsters. I could even wait till they make their first extra deck monster, send that monster back to the hand, chain summon limit, so that they can't, they can't use any more. They can't summon any more monsters, and their board is open. And what's nice is W Nebula Meteorite will then summon Worm King at the end of that turn. So then on my turn, I still have two summons to go through. And, that's you don't go through a lot of summons in Worms either. So that is just pretty neat. A couple examples of where I'm playing Summon Limit. So that's basically it for my discussion of Summon Limit. A pretty easy to throw in continuous trap card on slower decks that can handle playing only two summons per turn, and particularly good if you want to disrupt your opponents who are playing really combo summon decks. Summon Limit, limiting them to only two, will slow them down greatly. Maybe even cripple the playstyle if it's very reliant on like going in to be able to go in like 6 summons at once on one turn. And just very nice. It's a good option to have if you can't run something like Skill Drain or Teekboo, or you just want to have something where you can still use monster effects, still make it feel like you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh for the most part, just with a little less special summoning. So it's a very good card, definitely powerful enough to win you games. Um, there will be opponents and decks that will just crumble under this, and you can use that to your advantage. So yeah, pretty good card. Definitely think it's useful. Definitely think it's worth considering. If it's something that's useful to you, definitely consider picking some up. And that's it for this episode. I will catch you all in the next one.